It's like he gave the definition and Socrates said, okay, so you're saying this, and then Paul Marcus says, yeah, I'm saying that. If you use that to say that's what Paul Marcus is saying.
What?
Are you asking specifically about your answer?
Yes.
Well, then you can look at your grade right now, see what you got.
Because part of that is Socrates does that a couple, 3 times, actually.
Yeah.
He'll take what somebody says, so you're saying this,
Mhm.
and then he refutes it. So that could be it 2 or 3 times that it happens.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, just real quickly, let's do some review. So the Republic, what did I say the title means? Politeia, but yeah. Audrey? Things of the people or something.
Something.
It doesn't mean a representative democracy. Okay. Here's one of the challenges you face in great ideas. And you're going to find in college it's the same, maybe even more so, is you're used to, once I put something on the board and make like a similar, these are the 3 points, you know, you'll copy it down or whatever. But one of the challenges is things are said here that are important that you need to get down. Okay, and it's not always going to be laid out for you. And when you get to college, it's really going to be that way. The teacher's going to get up there and he's just going to start talking. And you got to figure out how to take notes. So anyway, well, the reason I mention this is that politeia doesn't mean a representative democracy. It's really talking about the Constitution that Plato's looking for. And by constitution, he doesn't mean a written document. Rather, he means the kind of the sum of the social and political life of everyone in the society, of the citizens, the polis. Okay, so it's really going to be dealing about, you know, the whole order of the social and political relationships in the polis. And the polis really is the group of people who are citizens. And who are the citizens in Athens?
Men.
The men.
And have to have like parents that are both citizens.
Very good. Under Pericles, then it was changed to where they both had to be Athenian parents.
They also can't be slaves.
Yeah, they can't be slaves. So free men, people, and also not youth, obviously, of a certain age, okay? And so he's really talking about, well, how does this whole social political relationship work together, okay? And then it's a discussion, first of all, of just what do we mean by justice? What would be a just constitution? In the sense, what would be a just order of the political and social relationships of the polis? Is that making sense? Now, one thing you're going to have to get used to, and it's going to become clear a little bit at the end here, and then even to next class, even more so, is Plato or Socrates goes back and forth between the individual and justice and the society, the polis as a whole. Okay, that's going to be an important thing that we might miss out on here. Now, Cephalus was the first guy. What was his proposal for what's just? Had 2 elements. Yeah, see.
This was being truly honest and came back with Jesus, that he owed to God and man.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, telling the truth to others and make sure you've paid off all your debts to men and to God. And what did Socrates point out as a problem?
So person about the right line.
And so what explain that? Yeah.
So that they can follow what
Yeah, it wouldn't be just to give it back. And thinking really kind of where we end up with justice, why would it not be just to give it back to them? Yeah, Jim.
It could be harmful to themselves or to others.
All right, you would cause harm. which is kind of what we end up with here, doesn't it? All right. The good person doesn't cause harm. All right. So Polemarchus now, he takes up for his father and he says, no, he's right. And he gives this definition of Simonides for justice, which is one you guys have heard before. What is that short definition of justice? Okay. Render unto each his due. And then, of course, Socrates does his Socrates thing, and he goes, I'm sure Simonides is a wise man, but and he knew what he meant, but I just don't quite get it. So what does he mean about to render to each his due? Yeah, and so Polemarchus then goes on further.
To render to friends, or to render to friends good.
Yep, yeah, that's the first one. Yeah, stop right there. So render to friends what is good. Okay. Polemarchus says that. Then Socrates says, so you only got friends. And what's the next part of the deck? What's the next stage?
Render to enemies, which is evil or harmful.
Yeah, so good to your friends, harm to your enemies. Now, in the context of Athens, friends and enemies mean something more than just your buddies. Yeah.
Like who supports you politically?
Yeah, so we're talking about political factions or parties here, okay? Oh, see me.
That's because the camera's right there.
Oh, I'm crushed. Why do I want to see myself?
You can see
Now I
yourself.
can,
You're
see,
right
now I
there.
can't see him.
That's okay. I dealt with this.
Is it recording?
It is.
Oh, good. I better not talk about, well, that was the last year. I started talking about gin or something. Oh, no, this is
You're
being
doing it
recorded.
again.
No, Mr. Boggs.
I don't
Anyway,
like it. I don't like gin.
you do?
No.
No, I don't. either.
Jen?
Sure. Yeah, like cotton gin for Eli Lilly. Probably
Who needs
extended
cotton?
slavery in the United States. by
Yeah, I don't
about
like the
20
taste of
years.
Okie dokes. So render good to friends and harm to enemies, and thinking in terms of political stuff, although it would also be on an individual level. So what's the first problem Socrates points out with this? What could happen here? Yeah, Sage.
I don't know if it's the first one, but
But we'll soon find out.
is it when he's trying to determine what a friend and enemy is?
Yeah, so what could be the problem there?
Or just not knowing somebody's a friend or enemy?
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, he's saying, okay, you give good to friends and harm to enemies. And then Socrates says, but couldn't you be mistaken? And he goes, yeah. And so then what would happen is you would end up going against your definition. You'd be harming a friend and doing good to an enemy. Does that make sense? So for rendering to each what is his due, it's important to understand, to know who the person is that's rendering and to whom they're rendering, okay? And that's going to be true anyway. But Socrates points out this is a problem. So then Polemarchus basically says, oh yeah, sure, I understand your point. So render good to your true friends, those are really your friends, and harm to those who are really your enemies. And so then what does Socrates say? Jacob.
Is that when he says, is it?
It's not Jeopardy. Be bold.
That's when he says, it is in, is it, wait, no.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is in no case to harm someone.
Okay.
Or
Well, okay, who would not harm someone? The general category. Yeah, a just
Yeah.
man or a good man, okay, never harms anybody. All right. So, and he uses some illustrations here, which are going to be or examples of this to make his point, which it's going to kind of came up again today in the reading. What are some examples of, you know, why the one who is over another wouldn't harm somebody, or anyway, okay? Remember this, I'm being vague here. So he talks about horses, for example. Everybody remember this?
Mhm.
You okay, Eva?
Yeah.
He thought-
Yeah,
Go ahead.
question again.
Sure. So you said something about horses. Do you remember what the deal is on that?
Like,
Horse.
if you do harm to a horse, you make them better, or something.
Yeah.
Something along those
Yeah, you
lines.
make a, yeah, okay. You make them a worse horse, okay? Yeah, if you look here on 32. And the bottom of the left-hand column. So, he said, certainly, this is Polemarchus, a man ought to harm those who are both bad and his enemy. When horses are harmed, does it make them better or worse? Do you see that? And he says worse, in respects to the excellence or virtue of dogs or that of horses. Okay, sure. And do not also dogs, when harmed, become worse in respect of canine and not of equine virtue? Everybody know what canine and equine refer to?
Horse.
They're the equine's horse, okay? And the canine is the dog, necessarily. So notice what he's arguing here is, if you harm a dog, he's not going to be good at being a dog, what a dog does. If you harm a horse, he's not going to be good at doing what a horse does. And then he goes, and men, my dear fellow, must we not say that when they are harmed, it is in respect of the distinctive excellence or virtue of man that they become worse, okay? You have to understand here that the virtue of something is its excellence. Hopefully this won't confuse you too much. But can you have, but I'll bring it up anyway because it brings the point up. Can you have a virtuous thief?
He's really good. He-
Yeah.
What
A
do you mean by
virtue.
really good?
Yeah.
Really good at his
Hold
job.
the
He
seal and get away with
excels
it.
in
Yeah.
his field.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he excels in his
excellent at it.
field.
He's like
Yeah.
a scarecrow. Outstanding in his field.
No. Oh, boo. Yes.
Oh!
Yes,
They have a
everyone's a
virtue of
critic.
fortitude.
well, yeah, but see, you're still thinking of the classic cardinal virtues here in moral terms. What Socrates is using here, the word arete, means excellence. So to be an excellent or virtuous thief means to do it well. You steal and you get away with it, okay? So that would be the virtue of a thief, but there's a virtue of a horse. What makes an excellent horse? One that can be ridden well, or whatever it does, or dog that maybe helps hunt well or guards well. All right, does that make sense? And the guarding well might actually come up later. But so for a human, what is the specific excellence of a human being?
Justice.
Justice, or yeah, it's justice. The specific virtue of man is justice, which then gets back to your very good question you had, Eva, about what harm means, okay? So you don't want to harm a person. Harming a person, according to Socrates, means to make them less just, okay? Really, it's what it amounts to. Because the virtue of man, the excellence of man, is to be just. And then a little bit further on down in the right-hand column there, by justice then do the just make men unjust, or in the sum of the good by virtue make men bad. Nay, it's impossible, so on and so forth. And then Socrates at the very bottom of the right-hand column. Is it not then the function of the just man, Polemarchus, to harm either friend or anyone else, but of his opposite? I think you are altogether right. If then anyone affirms that it is just to render to each his due, and he means by this that injury and harm is what is due to his enemies from the just man and benefits to his friends, he was no truly wise man who said it. For what he meant was not true. We're on the top of 33, left-hand column now. For it has been made clear to us that in no case is it just to harm anyone. So it's never just to harm anyone. So just man doesn't harm anyone in the sense of their character. Now, some of the things like you were talking about throwing people in jail, it's essentially meant to correct them. At least that's one way of doing it, okay? Perhaps, maybe it doesn't work too well. But the idea isn't you're harming their character, okay? which is what would be a harm for Socrates. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, what has he just eliminated in the political realm in Athenian politics? This is the jump I want you to make. Let's see if you can make it. Polemarchus, what was his initial definition besides, to render to each his due? How did he say it? What did he say? To do what? Do what?
Friends,
Benefit, friends,
good.
and harm.
Yeah, benefit friends, harm enemies. And he ends up having to admit that we should never harm anyone. Now, who are friends and enemies in
Is that
this?
just 11 enemies?
The people who enter your political alliances.
Yeah, or your party, your faction, and the enemies are not. So now thinking politically, what does that mean about the concept of how you, of friends and enemies, of parties or factions in politics?
With his definition or Socrates?
With Socrates,
Yeah.
yeah, with Socrates.
You shouldn't harm either.
Yeah.
Yeah, notice that. This really eliminates, if practiced, okay, this is theory, of course. This eliminates the notion of factions or parties in politics that work just for the benefit of their group and not for the good of everybody. Does that make sense? You see the difference there? You with me, Darren? You got it? I didn't tell him because you were on here, okay. Everybody have a good time getting here today?
Mhm.
Okay.
Rather
Well, that's not what I asked, but yes. All right. So notice that's a huge, huge thing that's just been said, statement that's been said by Socrates, that he's basically saying here, if a just person never harms anybody in a just society, there shouldn't be harming of others, members of the society. And the strict kind of political factionalism that was true in Athens, that if you're in power, the other guy's got to go. That's not going to happen anymore. Okay. Now we get to somebody that I really enjoy, Thrasymachus.
He
I
seems
like
like
him too.
You do.
a jerk.
Yeah.
Well, let's read a little bit here. I tell you what, Jonah, could you just start now Thrasymachus there for us here a bit? Just read that for a while for us.
Now Thrasymachus, even while we were conversing, had been trying several times to break in and lay hold of this discussion, but he was restrained by those who sat by him, who wished to hear the argument out. But when we came to a pause, after I had said this, he couldn't any longer hold his peace, but gathering himself up like a wild beast, he hurled himself upon us as if he would tear us to pieces. And Polemarchus and I were frightened and fluttered apart, and he bawled out into our midst. What balderdash is this that you have been talking, and why do you simple Simons truckle and give way to one another?
Okay. You've got all the words right. Mr. Bond.
What's the verb? For what Thrasymachus does? So he goes to talk, but how is it just he says?
He's restrained.
It's
No.
unjust.
He
Yeah.
bawls out into our midst.
Yeah.
What balderdash is this that you've been talking, and why do you simple Simons truckle and give way to one another?
Yeah, this is, I mean, and notice,
Come on.
notice the picture. He's like a wild beast. He comes into the discussion. They've been holding him back. And all of a sudden he just plunges right in, and Polemarchus and Socrates say they're frightened and they fluttered apart. What does that remind you of? What? Oh, butterflies. Okay, I hadn't thought of like pigeons. You know how you run in the midst of them and they
Oh, yeah.
flutter off. But yeah, butterflies would be the same thing. Huh? Oh, geez, they can turn on you
That's a
though.
brave-
Yeah, they can get nasty. Geese can get nasty.
Yeah, we don't want to chase the geese.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to be careful about chasing the geese.
Yeah,
They can turn on you. But yeah, so notice this is the dynamic of this Thrasymachus. He comes in and he just explodes, and he's furious at this. And look as he goes along. And if you really wish, Socrates, to know what the just is, don't merely ask questions or plume yourself upon controversing any answer that anyone gives, since your acumen is perceived that it is easier to ask questions than to answer them. But do yourself answer and tell what you say the just is. And don't you be telling me that it is that which ought to be, or the beneficial, or the profitable, or the gainful, or the advantageous, but express clearly and precisely whatever you say, for I won't take from you any such drivel as that. There you go.
Get to
what I
the
wanna
point,
say.
Socrates. Come on, man.
I agree with this.
You agree with
Yeah, we should
Well, he
Tell us
just
what
kind
you
of
get.
seems
I had that
real
part.
real
under-
pushy.
You'd like
He
that,
seems
huh?
like an
Yeah.
impatient person.
I would say that's true.
I don't know, he's dealt with a lot so far.
Yeah, well, but he's being restrained the
He
whole
also
time.
also calls Socrates a buffoon.
Oh, I know. There's some
Yeah.
other stuff.
Well,
there.
and not just a buffoon, but it's like you're a buffoon and take that in the
My
worst.
Detrimental
simple-minded
sense, yeah.
Socrates.
I
And
mean
then-
that in the worst sense.
Then I like,
know.
do you need a nurse,
Yeah,
Socrates?
no,
Somebody to wipe your snotty nose?
You call him simple-minded too.
Simple-minded, yeah, you
I
know.
underline.
I mean, this is real philosophical trash talk here. Maybe not clever, but funny, kind of.
Why is he such a
But-
jerk?
I know.
It's his nature. Yeah.
It's annoying.
Well, but in
Go
this
ahead.
what we just read, it kind of sounds like Thrasymachus is trying to, or it sounded like Thrasymachus
Thrasymachus.
is
Yeah.
saying that Socrates is trying to find the definition of justice. And I don't think earlier Socrates was trying to find the definition. He was more correcting
Yeah.
other people's.
Well, and this was Socrates' way. So Thrasymachus is right in that sense, is that he likes to ask questions, all right?
So he says, to know what the just is, don't merely ask questions. And he's talking to Socrates, but Socrates is trying to know what just is. He's
Well, I think he
asking-
is,
Oh, okay.
but he's gonna go through it, okay? It's gonna take a while. But look at that last part again, because something, Thrasymachus, unbeknownst to him, has actually added in something that's really important. Eva, read the last part, the last sentence of that paragraph on the left-hand side of 33, and don't you?
It's the last.
Last
The second
sentence.
to last.
Okay, what's that?
Paragraph. I called on the wrong.
Oh, and don't you be telling me that is that which ought to be, or beneficial, or profitable, or gainful, or advantageous, but express clearly and precisely whatever you say, for I won't take from you any such drivel as that.
What's he introduced here? Notice.
Benefits,
That,
Well, that's, yeah.
beneficial or profitable.
So the question now is going to be not only what is justice, but what is advantageous about it? Okay, this is another question that's going to be very important. So really here we have two key questions that Socrates or Plato raises for us. The first is, what do we mean by just or justice? The second one, is there any advantage to being just or acting justly? That makes sense? That's an important question. I mean, because ultimately Socrates is going to be dealing with, are we happy people, a happy society, happy, wholesome people? And is the just man that, or is he not? Okay. All right. Well, let's hear some of your paragraphs. Who'd like to read their paragraph about Thrasymachus's proposal? Sure, go for it, Ellie.
Thrasymachus' view of justice is that which is to be advantage of the stronger. Socrates' main argument was that this sentiment is a contradiction. It points out that the rulers are flawed like everybody else and thus can make flawed decisions. But it's still only just that the people under them obey them, whether it is to the ruler's advantage or not. If this is the case, people could be following a rule that is from the ruler, which is unjust.
Okay, very good. That's a really key critique, and I want to come back to that. I always hate it when people get the answers right. Yeah, so that's going to be an important part. There's a contradiction here. But let's start with that initial part about, did everybody get that justice for him is what's advantage to the stronger, correct? Okay. Now, whom does he say the stronger are? Who's he talking about here?
Governing authorities.
Yeah, the whole political thing, isn't it? The rulers, the authorities are the stronger. Okay. Because Socrates deals with some other things here. First of all, by the way, do you notice Socrates every once in a while kicks back? We're going to get into this in a bit, but there's going to be the problem here. So you've got, on the one hand, Thrasymachus, he says, justice equals advantage of the stronger. And the second part is about the subjects.
So it's just for the thing. It's from.
Yeah, but just the subjects obey the rulers. I'm going to put rulers here by stronger because that's who he's talking about here. All right, subjects obey the rulers. So that's, notice this is a two-part definition of justice. That which is advantage to the stronger or the rulers, and subjects then obey the rulers, which means they're working for their advantage. Does that make sense? Now, this is where he runs into problems. And Socrates asked the same kind of question of him that he asked of Polemarchus. Remember when Polemarchus said, do good to your friends and harm your enemies. What was the criticism that Socrates made, or the question he asked him that made him have to change his position a bit? The very first thing.
How do you know who your friends are?
Yeah, how do you know? Okay, the person's not infallible, are they? There's this issue of knowledge. How do you know which person you're dealing with? Is it a friend or an enemy? So he has to say those who are really your friends or your enemies. Now notice here, Socrates goes back to this question with Thrasymachus, doesn't he? Yeah, and do rulers know everything? Are they infallible? No, they're not. So notice this is once again a critique of this position starting here about rulers might make mistakes. What kind of mistake would they make? Yeah, they could make a law that's not advantage to them. Now, once again, I do enjoy these dialogues. So right-hand column 35 at the top, let's just read through this. May I ask, this is Socrates, whether the rulers in various states are infallible or capable sometimes of error? Okay. Same kind of question, really, in a sense, is about knowledge. Surely, he said, they are liable to err. Then in their attempts at legislation, they enact some laws rightly and some not rightly. Do they not? So I suppose, notice he's starting to a little bit, but notice this is, in other words, according to your definition, advantageous to the ruler. And by rightly, we are to understand for their advantage, and by wrongly to their disadvantage. Do you mean that or not? That. But whatever they enact must be performed by their subjects and is justice. Of course. So he said, yes, what's bothering me with all these obvious questions? Of course. Then on your theory, it is just not only to do what is the advantage of the stronger, but also the opposite. What is not to his advantage? And then notice his reply. What? What's that you're saying? He replied. Wait, What's going on here? Something's happened. I've just got trapped is what he's finding out, isn't it? Okay. And notice after this, when what you are saying, you yourself are saying, I think, let us consider it more closely. Have we not agreed that the ruler in giving orders to the ruled sometimes mistake their own advantage, and that whatever the rulers enjoin is just for the subjects to perform? Was that not admitted? Now notice how he sounds. I think it was, he replied. So he's in trouble. Okay. By the way, Thrasymachus is a sophist. Okay. This comes out that his job, and he was good at it, was teaching people how to win arguments for money. He got paid, which also comes up in this. All right. So he's getting caught here. And then, so Socrates goes on and says this, he's shown the critique, and we'll get back to that. But I do like where he says, towards the very end of 35, in that way, does not this conclusion inevitably follow, my most sapient Thrasymachus? Little knife in there. What's sapient mean?
Wise.
Wise, yeah. Oh, no, okay. Now, let's take an example of this. So, ruler makes law to his disadvantage. Okay, that's what Socrates is proposing here, correct? The ruler makes a law that's not going to be to his advantage. So the justice equals subject obey the ruler, right? That's what justice is. But by obeying the ruler, he brings disadvantage to the ruler. Is that just or unjust according to the pursuit? Unjust. Or unjust. Notice what's happened. You have one act that is at the same time just and unjust. Let's think of epistemology. What's just happened? The law of non-contradiction, isn't it? All of a sudden, you've got an act that at the same time is just and unjust, or unjust. I don't know why in English we do that, okay? Unjust, injustice. So anyway, notice, this is self-contradictory. This is a fundamental flaw. All right. Epistemology relates to political philosophy too. Yeah. I don't know if you want to throw in anything here on old Thrasymachus or anything.
I mean, another way that this idea is phrased is might makes right. Right.
That would be Thrasymachus's view.
Yeah, Thrasymachus. So, and this is a common argument in political circles, where it's kind of, well, is it okay for, such and such a ruler to imprison his political enemies? Well, who can say, but it's right for him, right? Because he wants to stay in power. So it makes the considerations of power of the highest importance when it comes to political considerations. right? Or it would be something like, yeah, you can have all of your ideas of justice and noble morality and whatnot, Socrates, but you're gonna lose.
Hmm.
Right? Because it's not that might makes right, it's that might writes the history books. Right?
Yeah.
So this is, one of the fundamental, I would say there, when it comes to talking about what is good in the political sense, this is one of maybe three major views that have persisted across time in human society. It's that the person that's strong enough makes the rules, and they're the ones that are right. We've encountered all three of them here, actually, I would say. Right, this one in last class, we had Capitalists, well, not Capitalists necessarily, but early Polemarchus, right? That relativism, you are, it's individual, right? You decide for yourself what is good in terms of politics. And then what's Socrates' answer to that?
That hand up on.
Oh, no.
Are you listening? What I was just saying? We've already answered this once today. It should be on the tip of your tongue. Ah. So Polemarchus, right? It's about individually we decide who's our friend and who's our enemy, and we help our friends and hurt our enemies. That is good in the political sense. But Socrates says, no, and he introduces, because I said there are three major kind of positions that keep showing up, and Socrates introduces the third, which is what? Not just to harm people. So justice is transcendent of the individual and of the circumstance. Now, there's further questions, right? Like,
Yeah.
what exactly is it? How exactly do you pursue it, etc. But those essentially three answers to justice, what is justice? Those keep coming up, and you will see all three of those throughout your life, where it's whatever you want it to be, it's whatever the strongest person says, and then it's something transcendent. We need to figure out what it is. Those are the three, right?
This is
fundamental to political thought.
and it's ongoing. I was interesting the other day. I was listening to the radio, NPR, your favorite.
Why would you do that?
Anyway,
Do that to yourself.
and there's a big debate going on in Kansas right now about redistricting. They may know what that means. I saw a query, not school district.
I wish.
So, yeah, so Kansas has 2 senators, right? For the whole state. Every state has 2 senators. But then you have representatives in the House of Representatives, and you have varying numbers in the states according to, well, yeah, but population. So New York has a lot more representatives than Kansas. But then here's what's going on is the state legislatures, based on the census reports, deal with districting. How many districts, well, they know how many districts they have. Like Kansas, I think, still has 4, if I remember correctly.
Representatives?
Yeah. 4. So then the question is, how do you determine the districts you're going to have 4 representatives? Now, the state legislatures determine that. Who's in control of the Kansas state legislature? Who? Not the governor. What party? The Republicans. So they're the ones putting together a redistricting proposal. Well, they've done some things, and on the Democratic side,
Imagine how it's being.
yeah. On the Democratic side, they're saying, no, you're changing these things, and it's going to cut out the representative for the minorities. in Kansas City. Okay, will be a Democrat. Okay. Now, what's interesting there is their argument is that minorities will lose their representative by the redistricting. The official Republican response is no, we're trying to even things out according to population. So that, I'll just use this term, 1 million people have a representative, and all 4 million each have 1 million with a representative for each one. So that's equal, all right? But it's got to be done in some way, you know, to bring it, how do you bring in out in Western Kansas in with these different population centers? So that's really kind of the traditional, or what's been said, the one man, one vote, without reference to color, race, creed, or whatever. That's the Republicans are saying that. This is a big dispute right now because Republicans want to get control of the House in the federal House, okay, the House of Representatives.
Yeah, of course, you look at it and what do you see? They're fighting over Douglas County.
Yes.
And essentially it's how diluted, right? Because Douglas County votes overwhelmingly Democrat, just like Johnson County and Wyandotte County and things. And that's where, right, it's Sharice Davids is the one Democrat representative from Kansas, and she represents, it's a District 1, but it's essentially Johnson and Wyandotte counties. And I think is Douglas in that?
Probably some anyway. But anyway, so
I don't remember off the top of my head. But you look at it and it's, you know, in whose interest would it be to dilute District 1's Democrat with because the rest of the state, except for maybe Sedgwick County, is very, very safely Republican. So where do you want to dilute the Democratic vote?
yeah, and so you can
In
kind of
Shawnee
spread
County?
it out.
No.
Yeah.
You want to do it there.
Yeah.
If you're a Republican, because if you're a Republican, what do you want to see?
All Republicans.
Okay, you want to see a Republican take over that district.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're a Democrat, what do you want?
Yeah.
Well, you want to retain it, but then you also say, hey, you know, Shawnee County's not, you know, unreasonable to win. So maybe we link Shawnee County up with Douglas County. And that would overwhelm, you know.
Sure.
So it's all about jockeying.
But it is very interesting. So notice the appeal then, the Democratic party's appealing to ethnic representation, which really isn't got anything to do with the Constitution, frankly.
True.
The other party says they're representing the kind of notion of fairness of each person, equality, yeah, of population, which is actually how it's supposed to be. So you got these two sides presenting their case as we're working for justice. And bless him, one of the Republicans said, look, this is about who's in control in the legislature. And the redistricting is done by who's in control in the legislature. That's the way it is. That's the way it has been. And that's the way it always will be. And that's the frankness there, that it's about power. Okay.
Unless you, you know, get a bad view, say, of Republicans or an uneven view. The exact same thing is going on by Democratic majority legislatures in New York and in Illinois, and it's all over the place. It's called gerrymandering.
Yeah.
It happens.
It's named after an original.
Yeah, and it happens all the time.
It-
Like I don't quite understand. I'll be honest. Well, this family does. But I'll be frank, I don't understand when people get so up in arms about it every time, or they act like it's some grave injustice when the other party does it. Like it's a lie. Like you're lying if you say that it's an injustice to gerrymander if you didn't when your party did it. It's so frustrating. Anyway,
Okay, so now.
how are you?
So this is the problem here, the fundamental problem that he points out to Thrasymachus. It contradicts itself. so that one act is just and unjust at the same time. But going back to just what we've been talking about, on left-hand column of 35, Thrasymachus talks about different forms of government. What are the forms of government he mentions? Yeah, left hand, did I say it right?
On what?
Yeah, 35, left hand.
Democracy and tyranny.
Yeah, democracy and tyranny. And so democracy works according to the what?
People.
The people, the good of all, right? According to Thrasymachus, and tyranny only for the ruler. So he's in favor just of tyranny. Is that what he says? We should pick up my tone of voice.
No.
What do they both do? Mhm.
Both governments are things just to.
Yeah. Yeah, who's ever in charge makes the laws. The identical principle of justice that obtains in all states, the advantage of the established government. So what Thrasymachus is saying here, you can have tyranny, you can have democracy, you can have oligarchy, doesn't matter. They make the laws and it's for their advantage. So Thrasymachus, in a certain sense, doesn't care about the form of government. Because for his view, it's always about who's in power. And as you say, might makes right in that sense. So this is a pretty, what we might call cynical view of politics, okay? But that's how he views it. Now, Socrates has pointed out this flaw in his argument, all right? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And of course, then you have this little sideline by what I call the cheering sections with Polemarchus and Cleitophon going, oh, he did it great. He got him, didn't he? No, he didn't, et cetera, okay, on 36. Now, Thrasymachus starts having this discussion about, or Socrates does actually, about the various arts. Okay. Did you not understand this? Okay, who had trouble understanding this? All right, that's fine. Good. I mean, I expected that. So let's look at that. So he talks about the art of medicine, for example. Okay. For what does the doctor who has the art, or the physician who is practiced, trained in the art of medicine, what is he trying to do?
People with medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, advantage of the patient. Okay, he serves the art, which is to work for the patient. How about the captain of a ship, or the pilot of the ship? What's he doing? What's his art? Yeah, the sailors, etc., to captain the ship well so that it gets where it's supposed to be, etc. So on and so forth. Notice here, then, this is what Socrates' point is, about the art, horsemanship, etc. The person serves the art, okay? The man who's skilled in training horses, he's working for that art to make horses good, okay? And so Thrasymachus, again, is hesitant on the left-hand column at the bottom. So it seems, he replied, but surely, Thrasymachus, the arts do hold rule. Are you all with me here? 36 left-hand column. And are stronger than that of which they are the arts. He conceded this, but it went very hard. Okay. Then, conclusion. No art considers or enjoins the advantage of the stronger, but every art that of the weaker, which is ruled by it. Let me just ask this. Please get this answer right. The art of teaching.
Advantage of the student.
The advantage of the student. You may not like the advantage, okay? Yeah, it's not about Dr. Isley, unfortunately, as much as I would like it to be about Dr. Isley. The art of teaching is to work for the advantage of the student. So a good teacher serves his students. A good horse trainer is really serving the horses in the art of horsemanship. So he makes this general principle. This too, 36, he was finally brought to admit, though he tried to contest it. All right, he didn't like it. And then he asserts, that was admitted. He assents reluctantly. Do you see all this way along the line? He's like he's being dragged along by this argument. So he assented reluctantly. And then all of a sudden, Thrasymachus gets rude again on 36 right-hand column. This is where he talks about him being a snotty-nosed kid that needs a nurse, okay? And what does Thrasymachus say? What's the example he comes up with, which he thinks goes against what Socrates is teaching? Yeah, Audrey.
Well, he says he doesn't know the difference between shepherds and sheep.
Yeah, and what's he mean by that, you think?
So I think that he's saying that ultimately every person does serve themselves. They
Okay.
do it.
Well, and with the shepherd, what's the deal there? What's the shepherd's art? Of course, what's he saying, Thrasymachus? Is the shepherd working for the advantage of the sheep?
No.
No, he isn't, is he? What's he want to do with the sheep? Yeah, exactly. Sell their wool and then eat them or sell them. Okay. Yeah. By the way, what's a neat herd? You might have to look that up. Is it a herd that's nicely groomed?
It's a thing that needs to be heard.
A thing that needs to be heard, isn't it?
Not needed.
Yeah, not needy, all right? This is an older word. It really is a general term kind of for livestock in general, like oxen and cattle, et cetera, okay? It's sort of fun to look that up. Now, do notice a point here that Thrasymachus makes. This is the bottom of 36, right-hand column. But you think that the shepherds and the neat herds are considering the good of the sheep and the cattle and fatten and tend them with anything else in view than the good of their masters and themselves, okay? So the shepherd, he's not working for the sheep, he's working for himself, for his own advantage. And by the same token, you seem to suppose that the rulers in our cities, and here's a big phrase, I mean the real rulers.
Right.
What's he appealing to here? When he says,
Not
I mean the real.
political. Not the political,
No,
the actual like.
Well, actual rulers, yeah, but why does he say this to Socrates?
Socrates starts talking about rulers of art. It's just strictly political.
Okay, kind of, but there's something else going on here. Socrates is saying, well, the ruler should be the one who works for the good of the people, right? That's what he's arguing. That's what a just ruler would do. What does Thrasymachus appeal to here? He's appealing to reality. Socrates, you're just head in the clouds. Real rulers don't operate this way. So here's a combination that's gonna come up again, and our good Italian friend in particular. Might makes right, okay? Ruling's all about getting and keeping power, and that's the way it really is. None of these ideal views of how society works.
The Bilderbergs.
The what?
The Bilderbergs.
The Bilderbergs.
Remember that
No,
conspiracy theory?
no, but I don't believe in conspiracy.
Well,
That's not
conspiracy
true.
fact.
It is kind of funny how conspiracy immediately means false in a lot of the.
Yeah,
talk,
that's a psyop by the CIA from the 60s.
as if it isn't that there
Come
aren't real
on.
conspiracies.
Yeah, they're all over the place. Because who was perpetrating all the conspiracies? The government.
Okay, but notice here. Yeah, Audrey.
I'm slightly confused because, I mean, I don't really understand why you wrote appeal to reality, because justice kind of is an ideal. Like, that's kind of the point of it.
Well, this is-
According to Thrasymachus? Maybe according to these, weak-kneed, snotty-nosed philosophers. But us people, they're
In
the
the know.
sheep, they're sheeple. We're the wolves. We know what's
Sheeple.
true, right?
Cheap people.
We're awake, say, to the reality of things.
So you don't operate on an ideal plane. This is the real world of politics. Forget your starry-eyed idealism, your head in the clouds philosophy. This is how it works. These are how real rulers go about it. Does that make sense? That's what and these appeals do go together, Audrey. They really do. The appeal to power and might, to what's often called realpolitik. You guys probably haven't got that yet, have you? Yeah, that'll come up more. That's 19th century term. Real politics, in a sense. You appeal to the reality. Okay, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. So once again, how does Socrates refute him, basically? What's he say about the shepherds? How does Thrasymachus misunderstand them?
Well, I do like how Thrasymachus has this big long.
Oh, go
speech.
ahead, sure.
And then he wants to leave, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't get to say all of that, make all these statements, and then just walk off. This isn't a drop the mic moment.
Yeah.
You've been rude enough to everybody that you're gonna have to answer for this.
Yeah, and I will say, maybe before we get to that, right hand, this gets back to your question, Audrey. Right hand column at the end of this speech, that paragraph there at the end, for it is not the fear of doing, do you see that? For it is not the fear of doing.
Right below 344.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, those are actually traditionally how these dialogues are written, so that whatever translation you have, you can go right to that. All right. For it is not the fear of doing, but of suffering wrong that calls forth the reproaches of those who revile injustice. Thus, Socrates, injustice on a sufficiently large scale is a stronger, freer, and a more masterful thing than justice. And as I said in the beginning, it is the advantage of the stronger that is the just, while the unjust is what profits man's self and is for his advantage. Notice here, he's saying, wow, the stronger, the freer, the masterful, the powerful. We're going to run next year in moral philosophy about a certain German that you've already read in epistemology that's going to talk about the powerful, the strong, the Übermenschen are the freer. Yep. Yeah, it sounds very much like Nietzsche here. Or you were going to say something.
Injustice on a sufficiently large scale is a stronger, freer, and a more masterful thing than justice.
Mm.
I don't know, that strikes me. Did that strike any of you? Audrey, you're nodding your head. Why did it strike you?
I mean, it just seemed like a bold statement. I don't really.
Can you think of any examples? I know we have several.
Of injustice being.
Well,
Example
what could Thrasymachus use to demonstrate this point? Either historically or contemporaneously.
Yeah. And maybe it was so have you guys, of course, you wouldn't be here yet in the history section. When I used to teach West Civ towards the end, when we got to the 20th century, I would show clips of Hitler's Nuremberg speeches and stuff, or the marches and assemblies, or the really dynamic one too, as well, of Mussolini declaring war on Britain, and just the flags waving, and Mussolini up there like this, or Hitler up in the front speaking, and people Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. It is overwhelming. I mean, wow, look at this man, how powerful he is. And people get caught up in that. It seems much more powerful, almost somebody you could worship, all right? Than somebody who's saying, well, I think we should care for the poor. Okay. See, sometime look up the clip of Mussolini declaring war on Great Britain for the start of war in World War II, because it's really quite dynamic. He's up speaking, and there's this massive crowd before him, and they're waving flags, and then it goes around to different cities in Italy where there are massive crowds connected, all collected or gathered, and all they've got are these speakers blasting the same speech out to them. It's really quite powerful. And then Hitler's Nuremberg rallies are very powerful as well. And you have in the propaganda film, the Triumph of the Will, you have Hitler coming down from the clouds in an airplane to the people like a god. It's very powerful, frightening, okay, and wicked. But this is what Thrasymachus is saying. All right. So Socrates disagrees, obviously. Let me just, because I want to get some. Notice what Socrates says here at the bottom of 37. Okay. Could you read that for us, Sage, where he just says, do you think, at the bottom of 37, right-hand column?
Do you think it was a small matter that you are attempting to determine and not the entire conduct of life that each of us can make living lives worthwhile?
Okay, notice what Socrates is doing here again. He's saying this isn't just an abstract question about what is a just society, because it's now brought in by Thrasymachus that what is advantageous. And so Socrates is saying this is a crucial issue. This is what we're talking about, what it is that makes life worth living. Is it advantageous to be just or to be unjust? Which makes life more worth living? That's a crucial question. All right. And notice here, Socrates kind of lays down the gauntlet. He says, next paragraph, the middle, I tell you for my part that I am not convinced. Neither do I think that injustice is more profitable than justice. Not even if one gives it free scope and does not hinder it of its will. But suppose, sir, a man to be unjust and to be able to act unjustly, either because he is not detected or can maintain it by violence. All the same, he does not convince me that it is more profitable than justice, advantageous. So here you get a real counterclaim against Thrasymachus. And Socrates is just saying, okay, this is where I stand. It is not more profitable, advantageous to a person to be unjust than it is to be just, even if they don't get caught or they can maintain it openly by violence. I'm going to stand with justice because that's what really is advantageous. We'll have to figure out why that is. Okay, that's an important. Here you get Socrates saying, this is it. I've made it. This is my stand. This is where I stand. Okay. Now, the shepherd, as a shepherd, his art of shepherding is for the good of the sheep. Okay, it's not when he's a butcher, it's not when he's selling them for anything, it's the art of shepherding in that sense. Okay, so that's the distinction Socrates makes.
It's distinct from the individual.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so to wrap things up, and I know you guys, you look cold, disappointed maybe, or tired a little bit, but what are we dealing with here? First of all, what is justice? And, well, just what is justice? That's what we're actually dealing with here. What makes a just society? What makes a just person? And then the second question is, what's better for you? To be unjust or just? What's more advantageous? And Thrasymachus, he's saying, look, who comes out better on the test? The honest person who gets his C, or the cheater who gets away with it and gets an A? And Socrates will probably say to you, it's the honest person that gets the C. I have to figure out why that is. And these are some of the most important questions in political philosophy and in life, frankly. Okay. And the temptation's always there to go the other way, I would say. I'm with Socrates against Thrasymachus on this, by the way, just in case you know. Questions, comments? Is it clear? Dagan, you think you got it down?
Mm-hmm.
You do? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Darren, do you think you're getting it? All right. Just a word of encouragement. If you are struggling to understand something, either after class, like we've just been talking, or if you're going through a reading and not getting it, we encourage you to come to us and talk about it. All right. Don't wander lost in the woods, because these are pretty thick woods. All right.
Just the wilderness.
The wilderness. This is you're calling my class a wilderness? Oh my God.
Okay.
Just because I didn't bring donuts today. See what happens? All right. So next section, pages 39 to 45. So start up there, book 2.
Pages 39 to what?
45.
It's the end of the book.
It's the out. So stop at book 4. Does that make sense? Pages 39 to 45. Here are 2 questions. And we'll also come back to the something of interest for you guys. We may do that anyway, since I didn't take much time because I was preaching so much. First question here. Something of interest from Socrates' description of the ideal city. Because he's going to talk about an ideal city. So something of interest from Socrates' description of the ideal city. Secondly, what is the problem with the guardians and how is it to be resolved? And you understand who the guardians are once you do the reading, okay? What is the problem with the guardians and how is it to be resolved? That's for Monday. Okay, so in case you maybe some of you might feel you need a couple participation points. What was the second question here?
Something
Something of interest. Anybody want to tell us what they found of interest? Sure, Eva.
So I thought a certain quote from this reading was interesting. For it is not the fear of doing, but of suffering wrong that calls forth reproaches of those who revile injustice. I'm not sure if this means fear of injustice being done against you or fear of suffering after committing an injustice and getting caught. I think it is more likely talking about the former. Either way, it is an interesting concept because it's still very much present in today, within people today, without people even realizing it. Selfishness causes people to promote justice in order to save themselves from harm, and not because they think it is right.
Okay, and actually, I think it is quite a bit that second one as well, is that, can I get away with something and not get caught? Yeah, I never can remember, what's the name of the is it Gyges, the guy that has the invisible cloak?
Or the guy just ring or whatever, that like.
Yeah, ring, that's right.
What would you do if you could if you were invisible and you could get away with it?
Yeah.
I feel like invisibility is a very bad power.
Yeah, and actually that comes from Plato somewhere, in there. He talks about it, yeah. So anyway, yeah, the question about, well, if you really could get away with anything, would you really do it? And, that's the question about, are you really just or not? Very good. Anybody else want to share something of interest?
Polydamas, the pancreatitis.
Oh, yeah, did you look that up?
I didn't get,
Pancreatitis.
that, I didn't get the chance,
Pancreatitis.
but I felt like he was making a joke that I didn't understand,
Well,
and I.
dear me, now what page is that on again? It's on page 34.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anybody know what a pancreatist is? Pancreatitis. Pancreatitis, thank you.
Physician that studied pancreas.
Do page
I don't think they know what that
34,
was.
bottom right.
Good point.
It seems like it's a small person.
It's not.
He's a celebrity.
Pancreas. Polydamas.
It's stronger.
Is it actually talking about the pancreas?
Wait, what are
I don't think so.
Beeves. You don't know what
Beeves,
beeves are?
ah, very good.
Good, yeah, there we go.
Very good.
I better get out of the way here. You heard.
What is the plural of roof?
Roofs. You mean roof?
What's the plural of hoof?
Hoofs.
Oh.
Beeves.
Oh.
Bees.
Bees? No. it's-
Beef.
Yeah.
Leaves.
It's cows. That's the plural of beef.
I'm calling.
Because
cows
beef,
bees
what is the
now.
language of origin for beef?
Is it like French?
It's French,
Yep.
right? Because Norman conquest,
Bees.
Speaking
the,
of the French.
yeah,
Bees.
Norman conquest, the nobility spoke French,
Like,
the poor people spoke English, which is German.
It's grammatically incorrect.
So the German word for a bovine, cow. So when it's the animal, it's cow. But when you're gonna eat it, or you're like, I'm gonna go eat a cow, then I'm gonna go have some beef. You're gonna go have some beef, because the people that ate the animal called it beef, right? Similarly, pig, pork, chicken, poultry, etc.
Fish.
Right? So the animal,
Fish.
Fish is for poor people.
the animal is,
Okay.
alright.
Not.
No, but like rich people, like they do,
But what's the name for,
The fish is so expensive.
Cod.
like, if
But back
you
then-
eat fish, but like you,
pescatarian.
yeah, so it's like,
We had this conversation in
Pescatarian.
history class.
I don't know.
Did you say Presbyterian? Yeah, Presbyterian, I think. Yeah, because,
So I still don't know who.
okay, yes. Well, let me tell you.
Oh, Thomas.
Polydamas was a champion from Thessaly in the 93rd Olympiad, 408 BC. And it was a mix of boxing and wrestling. What would we might think of today? Where you have boxing and wrestling combined.
Oh, what's it called?
He's basically Conor McGregor.
Okay, yeah.
Except good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he was an Olympic champion. And what's the point
MMA,
here?
he gets in the
That's
octagon.
MMA. That's what I-
Yeah, although
Yeah.
from what I know of the Olympics, it might be a little more deadly than.
Hellenic
It's
jujitsu.
just
Yeah.
their school.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, people die.
Jiu-jitsu is nice.
So,
Quite that.
so he's saying, so Socrates is probably really setting him up for some kind of joke here in a certain sense. So, I mean, to get on Thrasymachus's bad side, and just to get his anger, or rile him up a bit. Yeah, he's saying, so like, okay, what's the advantage of the stronger? So you don't mean that, like with Polydamas, that you know, for the body. So you gotta eat a lot of
So
food.
he's saying like physically stronger rather than.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
but protein shakes are good for polydamas, who's big and strong. They're good for us too, right? Is that what you mean by advantage?
yeah.
And also what does Vi and
Food, lions, yeah, food,
just doing?
Vittles,
yeah.
victuals.
Yeah, so for example, you know, even when you think about this health wise. So what's the name? What was the name of the swimmer?
Michael Phelps.
Yeah, Phelps. Phelps?
Yeah.
Is it Phelps? Yeah. Anybody ever looked at what his diet was?
Oh, yeah. It's pretty
It was
awesome.
just tons of carbs.
Sounds like a good
Yeah,
diet.
it was like
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but anyway,
15,000 calories a day.
how many was it?
15,000.
15,000 calories a day.
That's a lot.
But he also burns a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the point, isn't it?
Eating so much.
That's what's good for him. What would happen, Jake and you? Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
50,000.
Yeah.
I think he already eats that much.
My dad ate like 10,000 college a day.
Okay,
That's normal for athletes.
put his parents in the poorhouse.
That's why you get the,
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
I mean, I was eating the
Days.
equivalent of 3 meals at every meal during the soccer season, and we all were. So, but you look at, you know, they talk about like on the Lewis and Clark expedition, they were
Oh,
eating
yeah.
like 10,000 calories a day
Mid-card.
as they were, you know, when they were going up the Mississippi.
Yeah, 'cause they wouldn't eat
Missouri.
fish either.
New species.
That's a
That'd be so
trash
much
river.
fun, John. Discovering new species of fish.
But then you think them, they either took it with them or they had to shoot it.
Yeah, sure.
And they were still, I mean, it's crazy.
That's remarkable.
That'd be fun.
Oh,
I
yeah.
would love to do that.
And only like one man.
Kylie and I were Lewis and Clark for the
They
history
didn't
thing.
like it much at the beginning either. Well, that's what
No, that'd be so much
women don't appreciate when
Oh.
they're pregnant and complaining when I bring up Sacagawea. They don't appreciate that comparison.
So everybody got.
Sacagawea could walk across this continent pregnant and with a baby.
Yeah,
You
I
can
feel like
make it
that'd
out
make
the
them
car.
Yeah.
Watch out, watch out, watch out.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness.
Well, you know.